Do you remember when phones were actually unique? When all metal or polycarbonate designs made the phones more durable? Times when we had replaceable batteries, micro SD cards and headphone jacks. Back when phones were all about practicality. But nowadays, every phone seems to be the same. A generic glass sandwich, removing features that actually mattered. Why were things more simple back then? What actually makes a phone better? And the real question is, did phones used to be better? Firstly, let's talk about designs, because they used to be more innovative, more varied and more fun. We had phones like the HTC M7 with the premium all-metal design and front-facing stereo speakers, the Nokia Lumia 1020 with its colourful and durable polycarbonate plastic, which made it really durable and really comfortable to hold. And that's just the beginning. LG Wing had a secondary screen that swiveled into a horizontal position. ZTE Axon M had two screens side by side, and the Vivo Next dual display literally had a second screen on the back. It was like having two phones at once. And let's not forget about the beloved pop-up cameras. But these were all just concept phones with unique designs that were just fun and different. But if we go back to the Nokia Lumia lineup, that's when designs were actually practical. The Nokia Lumia lineup, like the 1020, 800 or the N9, were made from a single piece of plastic called polycarbonate. Compared to glass, it's more comfortable to hold, less slippery, more shock resistant, cheaper, lighter, easier to replace, and can just take more of a beating like you do from your parents. And today's phones are primarily made out of glass, including the back, which is slippery. It's almost like they want you to drop your phone. And you know the quote, glass is glass and glass breaks. Well, it applies here too. The pivotal point when phones started to use glass on the back was on the Galaxy S6. Previously, the S5 used a plastic removable back, which revealed a removable and swappable battery. But the S6 was just a slab of glass, so what happened? Why does it feel like we just suddenly downgraded the materials? Well, it's mainly because of the premium feel. It just has this feel that you can't replicate. The market demanded phones that look and feel luxurious, be thin, more minimalistic, and more aesthetically appealing to consumers. And it did achieve that because the S6 did look more premium, it looked more innovative and more technologically advanced. And also it introduced wireless charging, because previously on the S5 you needed a specific wireless charging case which just didn't look practical. But the S6 came at a huge cost, because although the phone was slightly lighter and a lot thinner, it sadly led to a smaller battery, and the battery is like the one thing that people care about the most. Combine that with the fact that you can't even swap out the batteries anymore or use the micro SD card, it's understandable why people would hate this design choice. It felt like planned obsolescence, because batteries is one of the first things that degrades in a phone, and removing the option for people to swap out the batteries left people with no choice but to rely on repair shops or just buy a new phone. But either way, you had to spend loads of money, and what's the point of having a premium design if you're gonna put a case on it anyway? It all just felt like one step forward and two steps backwards, because we traded functionality and practicality over looks. And luckily over the years, phones did get bigger batteries, but they also got thicker and heavier, just like your mum. But speaking of money, getting your phone repaired also got more complicated. Back then, you just pop open the back cover, remove some screws, and you can replace stuff pretty easily. But now, if you want to replace your battery, for example on your iPhone, you need a heat gun or a heat pad to soften the glue, and then wedge these picks while you use suction cups, disconnect a bunch of things like cables and screws, and pull one of these weird pull tabs. Like, what's going on? It's like I'm watching a surgery. What was that? Benji, bro fell down and took my whole setup. What the hell? Well, anyway, Apple has these weird hardware locks where if you use parts from a different iPhone, you get compatibility issues because you're not using genuine parts. And now, apparently you need to calibrate the parts. I can't be asked anymore. Apparently Apple has made it easier to repair their phones, but it's still so complicated compared to when you could just do it yourself in like 5 minutes. And going back to materials, plastic is not entirely gone, because you have these budget phones like the Nothing 2A and the whole Pixel A lineup that still uses plastic. I actually used to own a Pixel 6A, and this thing had a plastic back which I didn't even know about until I googled it, and then I took the case off and I don't care what material this is, I just put a case on it anyway, and it was a light phone. And now they're making phones with titanium, which is more lightweight and durable than aluminium. So like, okay, use whatever you want, I don't really care, make it with paper. You know, all I want to do is just sit down and watch some YouTube. And speaking of headphones, let's talk about the headphone jack and all the other features that have been lost throughout the years. So with the introduction of the iPhone 7 in 2016, we have lost the headphone jack, which obviously outraged people. Apple removed it because apparently it freed up some space on the phone, which is kind of true, but it wasn't a sign of innovation. It was a way for them to sell more wireless headphones. You could use adapters, but they were so easy to lose, and in case you did, they very conveniently sold them to you. Wireless headphones sound like the future. There's less wires, right? Well, they were so much more expensive. They had worse quality, more latency, and it was just another thing to charge. And guys, a sub to the channel would make Benji very happy. Do you remember when I said that the Galaxy S6 couldn't use the micro SD cards anymore? That was also a really huge deal because back then you can pick up a really cheap micro SD card and fill it with all your haram videos and music and then take it out and then put another card in. And now you're limited to your internal storage, which can be very expensive to upgrade, and some phones only go up to 512 gigs, and for some people, for some reason, that's not enough. For me though, I find 256 gigs enough. Like, if I need any more space, I just put stuff on my laptop. But actually, it is a big deal because it's making people buy more cloud storage, where stuff gets automatically backed up online and it syncs with your devices, which sounds convenient and great, but not everyone wants to be so dependent on tech. They don't want things done for them automatically behind their backs. This is partially why people support Sony so much these days, because even their most premium phone, the Sony Mark 6, supports micro SD cards and has a headphone jack, which is also true across their whole budget lineup. And one of their budget phones, the Xperia 10 Mark 6, also happens to be plastic and really lightweight. This also makes Sony sound like they're listening to their audience and prioritizing their needs, values, and practicality over industry trends, which earns them trust and loyalty, which you do have to pay for quite a bit because their flagships are really expensive. Now let's talk about cameras, especially the processing. And this is where it gets really interesting, but also very confusing. So over the years, we've been getting bigger and bigger camera sensors, which overall is a good thing because the bigger the sensor means more light information, which means better photos. However, the sensors cannot physically get any bigger because the lens is what takes up the most space, and it just makes the phone too thick and bulky. But each year, people crave more and more camera quality, so companies started to rely more on software to improve the quality. But in a way, this kind of started to ruin photos because they don't look as real anymore. If you look at this comparison, this person compares the Nokia Lumia 1020, which is a phone with an abnormally large camera sensor from 2013, and an iPhone 13 Pro. And I know this is an older iPhone, but the trend continues. And the trend is that the modern photos look overly saturated and overly sharp with too much processing and noise reduction. It makes the photos look too perfect and not exactly how you envisioned them. And this is not just a one-off example, because I've had people in the comments tell me stuff like this. For example, how the iPhone 5 captures the moment and the feeling of a scene, mainly because back then we didn't have as much AI processing, and the imperfections that we had, they felt more genuine and realistic. Marquez even made a video about this, explaining how the processing can struggle to recreate accurate skin tones, often making them appear too smooth or unnatural. Of course, this is not just an Apple thing, this applies to Samsung and Pixels as well. Especially the Pixels, because we're getting so much AI BS nowadays. Like, what the heck even is this feature? You can take a picture of your friends and then you can give the phone to your friends and step into the scene, and it will merge the photos and make it look like you were there. Or how you can change the faces in a group photo in case someone blinked. Like, what? Why would you ever want to use this feature? That is so unnecessary. In the future, we're gonna end up having like a photo that's 90% AI generated and 10% real. The fact that AI can make me smile and generate me more friends, that's kind of sad. Wait, let me write that down. Now let's talk about gaming. Back in the day, you had these super simple games like Temple Run, Subway Surfers, Jetpack Joyride, Clash of Clans, and those games are really fun. But it was nothing to do with graphics, it was just a super simple and fun concept. Also, there were no microtransactions, which means there was nothing really to buy, because the games were designed to play as they were. Games like Cut the Rope was really fun because having a touchscreen felt like you were actually cutting the rope. You didn't need anything else. But now you have app stores infested with junk. You have to search for a sea of clones which are infested with ads and poor quality unoptimized gameplay. Most games nowadays are just cash grabs designed for you to spend as much money as possible to even enjoy the game. Obviously, you can just go back and enjoy the old games, but if you want to find something new, you have to do a lot of research. Also, nowadays, games just focus too much on graphics. We are getting these insanely powerful processors which are capable of playing the newest games at 120 FPS. But can you even see the detail, and is that even comfortable on a small touchscreen screen? That's just not really how games were designed to be played on a phone. A lot of people just want to sit down on a bus and enjoy a game like Candy Crush, so that they can escape their super depressing lives where they work a 9 to 5 behind a desk and they have no friends, no goals, no passion, no motivation to live. But nah, let's just make everything more complicated. Also now, more than ever, we have a huge technological gap between phones. Because phones with Snapdragon 8 Elite are way too overpowered compared to a more budget phone, say the Poco X6 with the Snapdragon 7S Gen 2, the difference is huge. Just look at these numbers, the CPU is 3 times as powerful, and the GPU, well, almost 10 times the power. This kind of creates a problem because people with the best phones crave graphically demanding games that actually take use of all this power, but the majority of people do not have the best of the best. Therefore, the developers are more likely to optimize the games for the majority, which is the budget phones, meaning that the ultra graphics are just kind of an afterthought. This creates wasted potential. Phones are getting more powerful for almost no reason. And lastly, the thing that I wanted to talk about the most, when times were just more simple. When you look back at these phones, you get a sense of nostalgia. It makes you remember the good times when life was more simple. Phones were just tools. It was just the way to message, call, and maybe play some games. Nothing else really mattered. People didn't really obsess over specs as much. No one cared if you had an LTPO display, wireless charging, or 100 times zoom. The phone did what it needed to do. It was enough. We're stressed over such pathetic things now. We are constantly bombarded with notifications, TikTok trends, and marketing buzzwords like Gorilla Glass Victus, which is supposed to make my phone more durable, but over these years it sounds like it's supposed to be invincible by now, but why do phones keep breaking? It seems like we ran out of things to upgrade, so we just slapped AI on everything, and with every release it creates pressure to upgrade, to stay relevant and chase features that we didn't even know we needed. But it's so easy to fantasize about a new feature, thinking about all the cool things you could do with it, but this is creating solutions to problems we didn't even have in the first place. Phones are now so integrated into our lives. They are now a status symbol, a new lifestyle, an extension of your brain. You almost breathe through your phone. Society has made it almost impossible to live without your phone. We have become too reliant on them. You see QR codes everywhere. There's digital only tickets, and Uber, it can only be called on your phone, or else you're not going anywhere. You are forced to use your phone unless you really want to struggle and be left behind. This is why companies are creating dumb phones. Phones that only have basic apps and functions like calling and messaging. They are praised for their simplicity, their battery, and distraction-free experience. This is also why companies like Nokia are recreating iconic phones with more modern features like 4G. This is why people still use older phones and install custom ROMs, which are like custom operating systems to bring back older phones, because it allows them to use newer versions of Android. This is proof that people loved older phones, and this might be proof that older phones were better. We are trying to get away from everything. The constant notifications, the endless content, and the never-ending upgrade cycles. Why are we always wanting more? More is not always better. Why can't we just slow down, enjoy what we already have?